So with the actual self-tape audition, okay, there's three simple steps that I bring when I work as an actor, when I coach other actors, to the audition process, right? And there are certainly numerous ways and tools the actor can use to get to a spontaneous, honest performance. These are just tools that I've developed, influenced by books I've read and people I've worked with. But this way that I'm going to lay out for me is the simplest, most direct way that I've found as an actor to have the opportunity to give a really honest, spontaneous performance that brings my own personality to bear. Another way to say that, like I've been talking about throughout this webinar so far, is to do what's in my power and to have the viewer witness me doing what's in my power, because that's spontaneously going to reveal who I am. I think most actors, and again, a lot of you can have a different take on this, and that's totally cool. But for me, I see now one of the things that gummed me up when I was younger is the whole idea of character, creating a character. I think for most actors, the idea of creating a character becomes a big trap, because the idea of creating a character, not for everybody, but for many of us, makes the audition become a lie. I'm going to create something, and we don't really create something spontaneous. We plan something, and then we want to show it. So the audition becomes a signifier. It becomes a series of line readings or coached moments that we're trying to get right. And I think most actors, both with the self-tape audition and the normal audition, without realizing it, instead of really doing something to the reader or to the person they're imagining, like we'll talk about here today, what most actors are doing is they're just presenting different things and wondering if it's right. Here's this line, is it right? Here's this line, is it right? Here's this line, is it right? I'm doing this thing, is it right? Is this right? Or they're wondering, what is the other thinking? What are they thinking? Am I doing it right? Do they think I'm doing it right? I wonder what they think. What do they think? What do they, right? And like I've been saying, we can't control those voices, but we can do something that's in our power through them, okay? So the first step that I find extremely helpful is to take the audition sides and to ask ourselves, what's literally happening in the scene in the simplest way possible? What's, meaning without interpretation. And let me say now too that the best book on acting I've ever read is a book called A Practical Handbook for the Actor. I'm sure many of you have heard of it or read it. For me, I read it like 25 years ago or longer, I think, and it just crystallized. It just made so much sense to me. And I began to develop exercises and an approach based on what I read in that book. And it changed my life as an actor. And then of course, so it changed my whole life, right? I've never studied with anyone who wrote that book. I just read it and began to do my thing with it. But for me, it's the best book on acting I've ever read. One of the reasons I suspect is because it's really free from the cult of personality, because it was written by like 8 students. It's only like 80 pages. It just really practically gets to it from my point of view. So a lot of this they talk about in that book, but to try to streamline it here, it's pretty simple in the basics, which is, again, first step, what's literally happening without exaggeration. So I've written a little scene for me to demonstrate with right now. And let's say that this audition I get that I'm going to self-tape for, it's a detective. I don't have much information. He's a detective interrogating a criminal. And the lines I'm given is, hey, we know you did it. Just confess. It ain't worth it, man. Come on. We know you're guilty. We know it. Just frickin' confess. That's what I've been given. And all I'm told is that I'm a detective attempting to get the criminal to confess. So what's literally going on is the detective is attempting to get the criminal to confess. I mean, that's it, right? If that's all I've been given, I cannot say, in regard to what's literally going on, a jaded, cynical, world-weary cop who's got a real chip on his shoulder, because that's not there. And that may not be the writer's intention. Now, if in the breakdown for this audition I got for this let's say it's a movie, if in the breakdown it says detective who is an alcoholic trying to get sober, and right now he's a little buzzed and angry and hates himself. Okay, then that's what's literally going on. A detective trying to get sober who's a little buzzed and angry is attempting to get the criminal to confess. Anything that's in the breakdown, either the character breakdown, which is so important, the character breakdown and the story breakdown. And in class, I coach people to, when I go over how to create this, guide people to create their own audition notebook, their own artist manual. What I encourage almost everybody to write every time they get an audition is rewrite the pertinent details in this notebook and rewrite by hand the character breakdown and the story breakdown, because so many actors end up making choices with leaving things out. Or again, in the beginning, they add things that aren't there. So if all it says is a detective getting the criminal to confess, and these are the lines I have, then that's what's literally going on. A detective is attempting to get the criminal to confess. So that's the first step, is just answering that question. The next step for me in this process is, what is the action I'm going to play? And there are many, many different actions that could work with the detective attempting to get the criminal to confess. There's a bunch, right? I just want to find something that's fun for me, that my gut seems to dig, and it's something I want to create. Because again, I can't stress this enough, guys, and that whole first part of this webinar talking about owning those old beliefs, if we're doing that and we're getting creative with that, it helps then be able to get creative with the meat and potatoes of the audition, which is, I think we all want to get back to, again, I'm not trying to get it right. I'm not trying to win anyone's approval. I'm an artist. If you want to be a real actor, then you also want to be an artist. And I believe it's a holy calling, and it may not pay the bills, but if you have the will to do it, it will lead you to new discoveries of creativity and new discoveries of who you are and guidance in all directions of your life. I believe that. But right from the beginning here, we can get in touch with, I'm creating something. What do I want to do? What is an action that I want to play? And an action is something, there's a bunch of things that need to apply to the action we're choosing. But one of the most important is, it needs to have its test in the other person. Meaning with the reader, or whoever I'm acting opposite of, or as we'll see in a minute, if I'm acting off someone in my head, which I can do, okay? But I need to be able to see if it's happening in the other person. I need to know what that reader would look like if I got what I wanted from them, okay? Because if it doesn't have its test in the other person, then I don't know what I'm doing. And I don't know if it's working or not. I need to be able to see that other person or imagine them, so my mind can create for me a gauge as to how it's going. The action wants to be something physically doable. One thing. For example, get someone to do the right thing. Get someone to take a big leap. Get someone to admit they're on a hopeless path. These are all things that we can literally do and we can go after. And we'll see in a second, the third step is creating an as if to make it really, really, really freaking real for us. But this whole idea of having the self-tape audition or any audition be about one thing is so important, because usually when I work with an actor, either they're going to take my class or I work with my goal setting work, helping them to transform their approach to their career. Oftentimes actors will say, hey, can you look at my demo reel and let me know what you think? And a lot of times when I look at the demo reel, what I often see is it's like 19 things instead of one thing, right? It's, hey, we know you did it. Just confess. It ain't worth it, man. I exaggerate a bit for effect, right? But it's often like that more than the actor realizes. And maybe they were coached once and those things were spontaneous. Or often, I think, unfortunately, with a lot of coaching and a lot of classes, actors are actually given these fragments and not taught a way to actually make them spontaneous. I think most classes, and I'm not even sure the teacher is actually always aware of this, but with a lot of acting classes, they're not even teaching the students acting. They're like trying to give them really good directing, and then like, you go figure out how to make that natural. I'm going to tell you how it should be. It should be like, hey, we know you did it. I'm going to give you these pieces, and now your job is to go make them believable. Go make them spontaneous. And I'm going to yell at you in class and maybe make you cry if you don't find a way to make it spontaneous. And then when you're crying, you're so shattered and feel so uncomfortable and so much self-hatred that it seems kind of real now, or it is real, but no one, it's not the kind of thing you would want to do in an audition. But now the teacher's going to like, that's real. And everyone applauds, but everyone's really confused. And what is this demonic person doing? But we can stay stuck in classes like that because of the nature of the human mind. And we're loath to go with the idea that the emperor may not have any clothes. And I think in any class with any methodology, modality, acting or carpentry or whatever, it should have demonstrable results. A teacher should be able to show you. You may not be able to use the saw as well as I can or this other student, but you should be able to see how the saw works. I think acting should be that practical. It ain't easy, but it's simple, right? So it's not about having 19 broken things. It's about having one thing. So let's say, for example, the action I chose was to get someone to do the right thing. Okay, that fits in with the idea that the detective is trying to get the criminal to confess. The action I'm choosing to play is I'm Greg going to get someone to do the right thing. Now the third step is the as if phase. And again, the great way about one of the many great things about working this way is that, especially once you practice it, you can do it quickly. And it's a quick way to create these very specific, spontaneous auditions. Because isn't that what we want with the audition? Don't we want it to be spontaneous instead of pre-planned? Don't we want it to be honest? Don't we want it to be an improv? We've just memorized the lines or we're just reading them? I think we do. It's really hard to do, but that's acting, right? And I think a lot of approaches to acting are giving up on the idea of having the truth and just going like, let's try to fake it really well. Let's try to find a way to make it sound and feel natural, because we really can't have it be spontaneous. But I think we can. And this as if part and these improv exercises that I've developed are very helpful with this next part. So the as if is, okay, let's say I've got this detective part. What's literally going on is the detective is attempting to get the criminal to confess. The action I'm going to play is I'm going to try to get someone to do the right thing. The as if is something you can imagine happening to you, meaning you can imagine doing that action. I want to imagine a situation from my life where I would be trying to get someone to do the right thing. And unlike other approaches to acting, I'm saying don't choose something that's actually happened, because then we can't act on it spontaneously and we can't do these fun improvs with it. It wants to be something that hasn't happened yet, but we could imagine happening, and it's fun for us to imagine it happening, right? It may still be disturbing and something we would never want to happen, but for some reason, we can even fully explain it. It's a fun thing for us to imagine. And again, it's something that we could really imagine happening to us in our life. Maybe an alternate reality of a life where I got divorced, a life where, you know, you married that person, a life where you had a falling out with your brother, but it's in the mind doesn't rebel. And if you begin to work this way, you'll notice that this approach is I believe, taking advantage of a natural occurring thing, which is the mind comes up with as ifs all the time. You ever find yourself in the car and you're just driving or whatever, and you're having that imaginary fight with a loved one or with your boss or something, and suddenly out loud you go like, no, fuck you. And you're like, what am I doing? Talking to myself, literally. Well, I think the mind does it. Why does it do it? I don't know. Perhaps to prepare us for these situations that might happen, but the mind does it. So an as if that I could use for getting someone to do the right thing is imagining that I've discovered my younger brother is doing cocaine and he doesn't want to deal with it and doesn't want to go to an NA meeting or a 12-step meeting. And I'm attempting to get him to do the right thing by going to a meeting. Now, I hope my brother never does cocaine. As far as I know, he never will. I mean, maybe he's tried it once or twice, but hopefully he won't ever do it again or get addicted to it. But for whatever reason, it's fun for me to imagine that, probably because I get to be a hero to someone I love, or I get to help my brother or whatever. Who knows? I don't want to overthink it. We just want to look for the thing that's like, that's fun. When I'm working with people in class, I can often tell, we can tell, and when you're, you know, on the Zoom class or live or whatever, you can see it in people. When I'll say, like, do you have like a loved one that you could imagine helping out in a big jam? And they'll go, yep, I got somebody. Or can you think of an asshole that you would really love to put in their place? And they're like, yep, my ex-boyfriend. I want to use him. Let's go. Let's do. So you're looking for that oomph. You're looking for the fun. And this is probably a good time to really frame that word for us. Fun, fun, fun. Creation wants to be fun. Acting wants to be fun. It's not always going to be fun because it's bringing up this shit that we got to work through, but we can begin to have fun working through those old beliefs and owning these uncomfortable feelings. And we can know we're aiming for fun, but we want the audition to be fun, because if it ain't fun, it ain't going to work. And if you're in a class or you're using a methodology that is just like you don't like, and it's making you think of things you don't like, and you don't do it. It wants to be fun, and I believe it can be, okay? So this as if, I can imagine discovering my brother is doing cocaine, and I can see his bedroom right now, and I'm visiting him and all the family's gone, and it's just me and him. And I can imagine, like, I found this cocaine and he's like, I'm doing it. I've perhaps been doing a little too much. And I can imagine having the conversation with him where I try to get him to do the right thing and go to a meeting, you know, a 12-step meeting. And I can close my eyes and I can do an exercise where I picture myself with my brother in that room, and I can picture him and I can picture me. And he's now no longer saying anything. He's just looking at me, and I can watch myself try to get him to do the right thing. Okay? And I can also imagine what it would look like if I saw in his eyes that he was going to do the right thing, or he was open to it. Or I can imagine him saying, like, okay, I'll go to the meeting. And when I talk people through this exercise, as I'll most likely do with someone here in a few minutes, the mind doesn't rebel against this. The mind will allow you to imagine it. And then you can imagine doing this thing to the loved one, trying to get them to do the right thing. And then, as we'll see, you can open your eyes and you can do the improv out loud to a person as if they were my brother, and I can just keep going with the improv. Or I can also imagine my brother not actually out here in space, because we really have trouble doing that. That's why when actors like are imagining it's raining or imagining they're on a dirty street, we often see them trying to get us to think they're imagining it. So we don't want to see things out here. We want to see things in here. But I can look at a point and I can decide I'm going to stare at that point, and I can still see my brother in my mind, and I can still get him to try and do the right thing, right? So I can start it in my mind, I can open my eyes, and then I can keep doing it, right? So I can go, no, you need to look at me. I love you. I love you. That might make you very uncomfortable, man. Look at me. If you care about me at all, okay? If you care about me at all, do me the fucking decency. I don't mean to get intense with you, and maybe I am projecting my own shit, okay? So I'm not imagining my brother out there. I'm imagining him in here, but it gives the illusion that I'm talking to someone out there. And I'm imperfectly seeing his face, and I'm imperfectly trying to get him to do the right thing. And what we can do with this improv exercise is I can suddenly go from the improv to saying the lines of the scene, aiming to let the lines mean anything, mean nothing, and to do the same thing with the words that I'm doing in the improv, okay? I believe this is what we're after with the scene, not pre-deciding how I'm going to do each line, but just letting it rip. Doing the same thing we would do in the improv, with the lines. So I can go back and forth between the improv and the lines, right? I can go, listen to me, man. Okay. Thank you. We are going to have a talk. I need to talk to you about this for my own sake. And hopefully you're open to some things. Hey, we know you did it. Just confess. It ain't worth it, man. Come on. Come on. We know you're guilty. We know it. Just freaking confess. Scott. Please. Okay. I know it runs in our family. Okay. It runs in our family. My life was almost destroyed. All you have to do is go to one meeting. Hey, we know you did it. Just confess. It ain't worth it, man. Come on. We know you're guilty. We know it. Just freaking confess. So I can do that. We can do that. This approach to me is much more vulnerable and much more in many ways nerve-wracking, but in many ways much less nerve-wracking. But it leads to much more honest and fun performances. Instead of, again, doing what many actors are doing, which is, how am I going to say, hey? I'm going to say, hey, like, hey. And who is this character I'm creating? And maybe he's like, again, he's this gruff guy. So he's like, hey. Yeah, he's this, I'm going to write a 3-page backstory. And I'm going to think about the problem with all the backstory and all the ideas about character and the ideas of the way the lines should sound. We're not just showing us. We're trying to show the signifiers. I'm trying to show you my work. I want you to see that this work that I've done to create this character, right? But it's not real, you know? And the the cop that we believe is a cop is not trying to be a cop. He's just doing his thing, you know? So again, I can be like, hey, just confess. Look, we know you did it. Or I can go, hey man, just confess. We know you did it, right? We have all the evidence. We know you killed him. It's obvious. Just freaking confess, dude. Okay? I think there's a big difference. And what's great about these improv exercises is that you can actually use these improv exercises in a way that you can't in the real audition with the self-tape. Meaning when people come to my office and I work with them, or now I work with them online, we can do that improv as a warm-up, and you can launch right into the scene and just edit it out. So of course, they're not going to see the improv portion of it. But you can use that as the warm-up to get you to do the thing that is specific and that is actually happening. You know, and we're gonna take some players here and have some fun. But this is from the Epictetus book I mentioned earlier. I just love this. It says, to do anything well, start here actually. Notice what's actually happening, not just what you think is happening or wish were happening. Look and listen. To do anything well, you must have the humility to bumble around a bit, to follow your nose, to get lost, to goof. Have the courage to try an undertaking and possibly do it poorly. Okay? This is what we're after with acting and with auditioning, is to get in there and goof, to be open to the reality that it may not go well, whatever it is, but I want to actually do it. I want to actually do something to the reader or that person in my mind. I don't want to present how I think the scene should be. I want it to actually be. I want it to be me. Do you know what I mean? Again, here I am doing this webinar and I'm trying to, gently awaken the truth, maybe we could say, or nudge someone into seeing something, whatever the action might be. I'm teaching the class, whatever it is, and I can suddenly go to be or not to be. That's the question. Whether it's nobler in the mind's eye to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this petty pace from day to day, hickory dickory dock. Hey, we know you did it, just confess. It ain't worth it, man. I can say anything. It doesn't matter what I'm saying, it matters what I'm doing. And if I'm actually attempting to do something to someone else, you actually see something happening. And the self-tape audition can become this real thing that someone is witnessing, instead of this pre-planned, manipulated thing. And that's also why, yeah, we could talk about like, is it here? Is it here? Or should you have the black background? And there are all these things, right? But what's so much more important than anything else is, are you actually doing something real in the audition? And then the backdrop doesn't fucking matter. Is it here? Is it here? So much of that stuff doesn't matter. If you watch auditions that have made actors, or the audition, not one thing makes anybody, right? That's very true. But if you watch these auditions where someone got their breakout part, you can watch these auditions. They're all over online, right? Like, oh, the audition where there's one, Josh Holloway, this actor on Lost, or Jason Momoa, the guy from Game of Thrones. There's tons of these, right? But often when you watch the audition where the actor got the part, they're breaking all the rules. They're breaking all the rules of the way a self-tape's supposed to be and what an audition is supposed to be. But what they are doing is having no character to break. They're just doing the thing. They're doing something real to the reader, and it's happening in real time. There's this audition where the actor Josh Holloway was auditioning for Lost, and you see him, and it's not a self-tape, he's in the room, but it's all the same principle. He's in this audition, and you hear J.J. Abrams in the background or whatever, and he's doing this scene, and he's doing the scene, and he's like, listen, I'm telling you, it's not gonna happen the way you think it's gonna happen, man. It's going down the way I think it's gonna happen, or we're not doing it all, and I don't freaking care what you do. I don't care. And he storms off, right? You just watch him walk off, and he comes back into frame, and he's like, I'm so sorry. And they're like, no, that was great. He's apologizing because for him, it was all over the place. But for them, they were like, we saw the character because there was no character, right? They just saw him. And when you are really doing something to somebody else and not manipulating it, the viewer gets an opportunity to have the suspension of disbelief. And suddenly you seem like that character because you're not doing a character, and you're not trying to get it right, and you're not staying in either acting wise or like technical wise the frame I need to stay in. You're just letting it frickin' rip. And true story with that Lost audition, or I mean, I read it in an interview with J.J. Abrams, but he said when they, and Josh Holloway, this actor is from Georgia, and they were shooting the pilot. He got cast in this part because they had this great audition, much better than the one I just did, but he had a really great audition. But on set, they were shooting the pilot, and Josh Holloway was really self-conscious and kind of weird. And so JJ said, cut, and he took him aside, and he said, Josh, what's going on? And he seemed a little weird. And Josh Holloway said, well, I'm trying to get the accent down and the mannerisms. And JJ was like, what do you mean? And Holloway said, well, the character's, he's a New York City con man, and it's hard for me to get. And J.J. Abrams said, whoa, no, Bud, that was originally, he was a New York City con man, but then you auditioned, and now he's not a New York City con man anymore. He's you. Forget that. Well, then where is he from? Where are you from? Peachtree, Georgia. Peachtree, Georgia. That's where this character's from. Why do you think what you're wearing is so similar to what you wore in the audition? Right? So it's us. We want to show us in the most unfiltered way possible.